Welcome to the dark corners of your imagination, where nightmares take form and shadows hold secrets. This is Mr. Night's Scares Story, your gateway to the macabre, the unexplained, and the terrifying. Here, we dive deep into the spine-chilling stories that keep you awake at night, true tales of haunted places, unspeakable horrors, and things that go bump in the night. From cursed objects to paranormal encounters, from urban legends to sinister truths, we uncover it all. But beware, these stories have a way of lingering. Once you hear them, they might follow you, whispering in the dark when you're all alone. So, if you dare step into the unknown, subscribe, turn off the lights, and join us as we venture into the shadows. This is Mr. Night's Scares Story, where fear finds you. Story number 1. The Hollow Road. There's a stretch of highway in Arizona that few people know about, and even fewer dare to drive after dark. Locals call it the Hollow Road, a desolate stretch that runs through the desert for 30 unmarked miles. There are no gas stations, no lights, and no exits, just an endless empty road. The legend says the road doesn't exist on any map, and those who drive it at night never return. But for Mark, a traveling salesman with a penchant for urban legends, it was the perfect challenge. "I'll prove it's just a story," he told his girlfriend, Sarah, over the phone. "A quick drive, and I'll call you when I'm through." Sarah begged him not to go, but Mark was stubborn. He set out just after sunset, armed with a full tank of gas, a flashlight, and his camera to document the journey. The road appears. Mark followed the directions he'd found on an obscure online forum. After an hour of driving through the desert, he spotted it. A narrow, unmarked road branching off the main highway. The asphalt was cracked and uneven, and the road stretched straight into the horizon, flanked by saguaros and scrub brush. "This must be it," Mark said, gripping the wheel. He felt a strange pressure in his chest as he turned onto the road, but he brushed it off as excitement. The first hour. First, the drive was uneventful. The sky darkened, and stars began to shimmer above the desert. Mark turned on the radio, but all he got was static. About 20 minutes in, he noticed something odd. He hadn't passed another car, not even a distant pair of headlights. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, with no curves or landmarks. His GPS lost signal. His phone followed soon after. "That's weird," he muttered, glancing at the dashboard. The clock had stopped too, the figures in the dark. An hour in, Mark began to feel uneasy. He swore he saw shapes moving in the shadows just beyond the road's edge. Figures tall and thin, with limbs that seemed too long. When he slowed down to get a better look, the figures vanished. "Just my imagination," he told himself, though his hands tightened on the wheel. But the unease grew stronger. The temperature inside the car dropped, and the air smelled faintly of rot. He turned up the heat, but it didn't help. The hitchhiker. Mark was starting to consider turning back when he saw something ahead. A figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a woman, barefoot and wearing a tattered dress. Her head was bowed, her hair hanging in front of her face. Mark slowed to a stop, rolling down his window. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond. "Do you need a ride?" The woman slowly lifted her head. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes dark hollows. She smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long. Mark slammed on the gas, swerving around her. As he sped away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman was gone. The endless loop. Mark drove faster, desperate to find the end of the road. But no matter how far he went, the landscape didn't change. The same saguaros, the same scrub brush, the same endless stretch of asphalt. His fuel gauge, which had been full when he started, was now inexplicably near empty. Panic set in. He floored the accelerator, but the faster he went, the more the shadows seemed to close in around him. The headlights dimmed, and the road ahead seemed to ripple like a mirage. Suddenly, his car stalled. "No, no, no!" Mark yelled, fumbling with the keys. The engine refused to start. The visitors. As silence engulfed him, Mark heard faint whispers. They were coming from outside the car, circling it. He turned on the flashlight and pointed it out the window. The beam illuminated a figure standing just a few feet away. It was the woman again, but this time she wasn't alone. More figures emerged from the shadows. Men, women, and children, all with hollow eyes and jagged smiles. They surrounded the car, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Join us, stay with us." Mark locked the doors and tried the ignition again. The engine roared to life and he slammed on the gas, barreling through the figures. They didn't move. As the car passed through them, they dissolved into black mist. The return. Mark drove until the sun began to rise. He didn't know how long he'd been on the road, but finally, he saw a sign for the main highway. He pulled over at the first gas station he found, shaking and covered in sweat. The attendant, a grizzled old man, looked up from his newspaper. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. Mark told him everything. The man's face darkened. "You're lucky you made it out," he said. "Most don't. That road doesn't like to let people go." Mark checked his car. The tires were worn to the threads, and the hood was covered in handprints. Dozens of them, pressed into the metal like brands. Epilogue. Mark never spoke of the hollow road again. But sometimes, late at night, when the desert wind howled, he thought he could still hear the whispers. And in his dreams, he always saw the woman, smiling as she waited for him to return. Story number 2. The Midnight Carnival. Every year, the small town of Greystone held its annual fair. Rides, games, and food stalls lined the field behind the old high school, drawing families and visitors from miles around. But in 1985, something strange happened. That year, a second carnival appeared, one that no one in Greystone had planned or invited. It arrived in the dead of night, unannounced. By morning, a new set of tents and rides stood at the edge of the forest, on a patch of land long abandoned. The colors were garish, deep purples and blood reds, and the rides towered unnaturally high, casting long, ominous shadows. A sign above the entrance read, "Welcome to the Midnight Carnival. Come if you dare." The invitation. At first, the townspeople were hesitant. The carnival hadn't been advertised, and no one had seen its workers set it up. But curiosity won out, and by dusk, a small crowd had gathered at the gate. The first to enter were teenagers. Among them were best friends Lisa, Tom, and Erica. They'd been inseparable since childhood, always chasing adventure. "This is weird," Lisa said as they stepped inside. The air felt heavier, and the lights seemed to flicker without rhythm. "It's just a carnival," Tom replied, though his voice wavered. The workers were strange. They moved silently, their faces hidden by masks that didn't quite fit. A man in a ringmaster's coat handed each of them a silver ticket. "Enjoy the show," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "The games begin." The carnival was unlike any they'd seen before. The games were bizarre and unsettling. One booth featured a row of jars, each containing a glowing light. The sign read, "Guess the soul." "What kind of game is this?" Erica muttered. Tom shrugged. "Let's find something less creepy." But no matter where they went, the games were all the same. One stall had knives to throw at spinning mannequins that screamed when hit. Another required contestants to walk through a mirror maze where their reflections didn't always follow their movements. The rides were worse. A roller coaster looped into a black void, and those who rode it came back pale and shaken, refusing to talk about what they'd seen. The haunted tent. As the night wore on, Lisa noticed something strange. The crowd wasn't thinning. People who entered the carnival didn't seem to leave. "I want to go," she told her friends. "Let's check out one more thing," Tom said, pointing to a large tent in the center of the grounds. The sign above it read, "The Show of Shadows." Inside, the tent was dark and cold. Rows of chairs faced a stage lit by a single spotlight. A voice boomed through the space. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Show of Shadows. Tonight, you'll see things beyond your wildest imagination." A curtain rose, revealing a shadowy figure that moved like smoke. It shifted and grew, taking on the shape of a man, then a beast, then something unrecognizable. The audience watched in silence, mesmerized. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The shadow wasn't just a trick of the light. It was alive. And it was watching her. The disappearance. When the show ended, Lisa realized Erica was gone. She was right here, Lisa said, panic rising in her voice. Tom looked around. Maybe she stepped out? But no one in the audience remembered seeing her leave. Desperate, they searched the carnival, calling Erica's name. The workers ignored them, their masked faces turning away as if they didn't hear. Finally, they came to a dark alley between two tents. At the end of it stood the ringmaster. Looking for someone? He asked, smiling. Where's Erica? Lisa demanded. The ringmaster gestured to the Ferris wheel, its cars creaking as they moved. She's part of the carnival now. Lisa and Tom ran to the Ferris wheel. As it turned, they saw Erica in one of the cars. She was staring straight ahead, her face blank, her eyes lifeless. Erica! Lisa shouted, but she didn't respond. The escape. Lisa grabbed Tom's arm. We have to get out of here. They sprinted toward the entrance, but the path seemed to stretch endlessly. The lights flickered, and the air grew colder with each step. Behind them, the workers began to follow, their movements unnaturally fast. The ringmaster's voice echoed through the carnival. You can't leave. The show must go on. Lisa tripped, pulling Tom down with her. When they looked up, the ringmaster was standing over them, holding a glowing jar. You should have stayed, he said, opening the jar. A blinding light engulfed them, and everything went dark. The next day, when the townspeople came to investigate the carnival the next morning, they found nothing but an empty field. No tents, no rides, no sign it had ever been there. But there were footprints in the dirt, leading to the forest. And on a nearby tree, scratched into the bark, were the words, Beware the Midnight Carnival. It always returns. Story number 3. The House That Calls. There's a house on the outskirts of Silver Pines that no one talks about. It's a house that doesn't belong. Sitting on a hill where the trees grow too tall and the shadows stretch too long. It's said that if you hear the house calling your name, you'll be compelled to enter, and once you go in, you never come out. For Sam, an amateur paranormal investigator with a reputation for chasing urban legends, the house was irresistible. He'd heard whispers about it online. Stories of people who vanished, of strange lights in the windows, of voices that lured you inside. Sam's friends, Lily and Matt, begged him not to go. This isn't like the other places, Lily warned. This one feels wrong. That's why I have to see it, Sam replied, packing his gear. The arrival. The trio arrived at dusk. The house loomed above them, its weathered wood and broken shutters casting jagged shadows in the fading light. It was bigger than they'd imagined, with a crooked roof and windows that seemed to watch them. Are we really doing this? Matt asked, clutching his flashlight like a lifeline. Sam nodded, already filming with his camera. We'll be in and out. Just a quick exploration. But as they approached, the air grew heavy, and a low hum vibrated through the ground. Do you hear that? Lily whispered. The others nodded. It wasn't a sound, exactly. It was more like a feeling, deep in their bones. Inside the house, the door creaked open before they touched it, revealing a dark hallway lined with faded wallpaper and peeling paint. Hello, Sam called, his voice echoing unnaturally. No response. They stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The house smelled of mildew and something metallic, like rust or blood. The walls were covered in strange symbols carved into the wood, symbols that seemed to shift when you looked away. This place is wrong, Lily said, shivering. Let's just get some footage and go, Sam replied, though his hands were shaking. The whispers. As they moved deeper into the house, the temperature dropped. Frost formed on the windows, and their breath hung in the air. Then they heard it. A voice, faint and melodic, calling Sam's name. Do you hear that? Sam asked, spinning around. Lily and Matt shook their heads. You're imagining it, Matt said. But his voice was trembling. The voice grew louder, beckoning Sam toward a door at the end of the hall. I need to see what's in there, he said, stepping forward. Lily grabbed his arm. Don't. Please. But Sam shrugged her off and opened the door. The room of mirrors. The room was empty, except for a large mirror on the far wall. Its surface was cloudy, like it hadn't been cleaned in years. Sam approached, his reflection rippling as if the glass were water. "Sam, stop," Lily pleaded, but he was transfixed. The mirror began to glow, and his reflection smiled. A smile that didn't match his own. "Come closer," the reflection whispered. Before anyone could stop him, Sam reached out and touched the glass. It wasn't solid, it was cold and wet, like stepping into a pool. "Sam, no!" Lily screamed as he was pulled inside. The house shifts. The moment Sam disappeared, the house groaned, and the floor buckled beneath them. "We have to get out of here," Matt yelled, dragging Lily toward the door. But the hallway was no longer the same. The walls twisted, the symbols glowing faintly, and the door they'd entered was gone. Instead, the house seemed to stretch endlessly, each room leading to another, each one darker and more oppressive. And then the whispers began again. This time they were calling Matt's name. The descent. Matt couldn't resist. He walked toward a staircase that hadn't been there before, his flashlight flickering wildly. "Matt, stop!" Lily cried, but he was already halfway down. She followed him, the air growing colder with each step. The stairs led to a basement, but it was no ordinary basement. The walls were alive, pulsing like flesh, and the floor was covered in black water. In the center of the room stood Sam, or what used to be him. His skin was pale and translucent, his eyes glowing white. He smiled at them, his voice echoing as he spoke. "You shouldn't have come. The escape." Matt froze, his body trembling. "Sam?" But whatever stood before them wasn't Sam anymore. It moved closer, its limbs elongating, its smile widening unnaturally. Lily grabbed Matt's arm and pulled him back up the stairs. The house shook violently, the walls closing in around them. "Run!" she screamed. They barreled through the twisting hallways, dodging falling beams and grasping shadows. Finally, they saw it, a window just big enough to crawl through. Matt smashed it with his flashlight, and they climbed out, tumbling onto the overgrown grass. The aftermath. When they looked back, the house was gone. The hill was empty, as if it had never been there. But Sam was still missing. Weeks passed, and Matt and Lily tried to move on. But late at night, they both heard the same thing. A voice, faint and melodic, calling their names. Epilogue. A year later, a new family moved to Silver Pines. They noticed a strange house on the hill and decided to explore. The cycle had begun again.